What would you do if a boy in taped-up boots promised to heal your child, and meant every word? That morning in Birmingham was bitter. Not snowy, but the kind of cold that scraped your fingers and hung on your breath. Outside the city's children's hospital on St. Catherine's Road, people moved briskly, wrapped in thick scarves, coffees in hand, faces set like stone. Everyone rushed. Except one boy. He sat beside the entrance, balanced on a flattened cereal box, a pencil moving across a creased notepad. His name was Cairo Ibarra. 9. His coat swallowed him whole, the sleeves rolled back twice. One boot was torn across the front, held with tape. A wool hat sagged low over his eyes. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't speak. He watched. Staff had tried asking him to leave once, but he never caused problems. He greeted people kindly. Over time, they stopped bothering. Some even smiled at him as they passed. He came every Saturday. Nobody knew who he was waiting for. Nobody asked. Across the street, a silver Range Rover idled near a faded yellow line. The driver didn't move. His name was Callum Rhodes, late 40s, salt and pepper hair, shirt wrinkled beneath a loose tie. His car gleamed, but his shoulders were slumped like a man barely holding on. In the rear, his 6-year-old daughter Nia sat in a booster, curled under a soft blanket. Her curls rested against one cheek. Her eyes were wide, but her mouth hadn't spoken in days. She used to climb trees. Now she barely moved. Callum opened the door and lifted her with care. She weighed too little. Her arms hung still. He didn't notice Cairo watching, but Cairo noticed him. He studied the way the man held her, arms steady like she might break. He saw her gaze fixed on the clouds, never on the doors. Then, as they passed, Cairo rose and spoke. "Sir, I can help your daughter walk." Callum stopped, one foot in the air. Not because it was strange, but because the voice was certain, not loud, not playful, just direct. He turned. "What did you say?" Cairo closed his notepad, stepped forward. "I can help her." Callum's grip tightened. "That's not something you joke about." "I'm not joking," Cairo replied calmly. There was no grin. Just stillness, like someone much older had settled inside him. Callum glanced down. Torn coat. Taped boot. A pair of broken glasses dangled from his collar. It had to be some setup. He turned and walked into the hospital without another word. But the voice wouldn't leave him. For hours, Callum sat through appointments, therapists, specialists. Everyone said the same things. Steady process, slow improvement, hope, but no promises. Yet all he heard was that sentence, repeated like a whisper. "I can help her." By early afternoon, the sky had cleared, but the cold still lingered. As he carried Nia back to the car, he looked up, and there he was again. Same boy. Same spot. This time, Cairo was watching him directly. Callum paused. "You again," he said, stepping closer. "Why'd you say that earlier? You think it's funny?" Cairo shook his head. "No, sir. You don't even know her." Cairo met his eyes. "I don't need to." Callum placed Nia into the car gently. He didn't say more. But for some reason he couldn't forget that voice. Callum narrowed his gaze. "How old are you? 9? 10? 9. Callum folded his arms. "You're a kid, sitting outside a hospital with tape holding your boots together. What could you possibly know about helping my daughter?" Cairo lowered his eyes, thumb brushing the worn edge of his notebook. "My mum used to help people move again. She was a physiotherapist. Taught me loads. She said the body never truly forgets. It just takes time to remember." Callum's expression hardened. "Let me guess. You saw her stretch some legs and now you think you're qualified?" "I saw her help a man get out of a wheelchair after 5 years," Cairo said calmly, lifting his gaze. "She didn't use machines. Just her hands, her time, and belief." Callum opened his mouth to snap back, but didn't. A nurse passing by gave Cairo a brief wave. A hospital porter nodded toward him. They knew the boy. "I'm not giving you anything," Callum muttered. I never asked. Then what do you want? 1 hour, Cairo replied. Let me try. Callum looked at Naya. She was watching them, silent but alert. He sighed and rubbed between his eyes. I should walk away. Cairo didn't blink. I should call someone to come move you on. Still, the boy stood quietly. After a pause, Callum exhaled hard. Fine. You want to waste your time? Meet us at Harrington Park, noon tomorrow. Be on time. Cairo nodded once. I will. Callum climbed into the SUV and drove off. He didn't look back, but in the mirror, he saw Cairo still standing there, arms by his side, face blank as stone. That evening, Callum sat in his study. Paperwork scattered across his desk, none of it registering. His thoughts drifted to the boy. That voice. That confidence. Like he knew something others didn't. Naya peeked through the door. Dad? He looked up. Yeah, sweetheart? Who was that boy? Callum paused. Someone we saw today. Outside the clinic. He looked like he meant it, she said. Meant what? She hesitated. That I'd walk again. He stared at her. She gave a faint smile and tapped her fingers along the side of her chair like they were walking feet. Callum didn't smile back. Not because he wasn't moved, but because something unfamiliar stirred in him. It wasn't relief. It was sharper. It was hope. Harrington Park wasn't fancy. Rusted swings, faded lines on the basketball court, overgrown patches where grass once tried to grow. But at 11:50, Cairo was already there. His coat hung low, same as before, but his sketchpad was tucked away. A small gym bag sat at his feet. A folded towel lay beside him. At 12:07, Callum pulled up and silently helped Nia into her chair, wheeling her over without a word. His arms were tight, his face unreadable. Cairo stood as they approached. Good afternoon. Callum gave a stiff nod. Nia gave a shy wave. Hi, Nia, Cairo said gently. Her face brightened. Hi. Callum raised a brow. How do you know her name? You said it yesterday, Cairo replied. I listen. Callum gestured to the towel. So, what now? Some kind of miracle? No, sir. Just what I know. He unzipped his bag and took out a pair of socks, a tennis ball, a jar of cocoa butter, and a cloth-wrapped pouch. Callum squinted. What's that for? Heat. Helps relax muscles. Balls for pressure spots. My mum taught me. He turned to Nia. Can I work with your legs? No pain. You just tell me to stop if it's uncomfortable. She looked to her dad. Callum nodded. All right, be gentle. Cairo knelt, unwrapped her legs and placed the warm pouch across her thighs. She flinched. Too much? No, it feels nice. He waited, then started softly moving her legs. Slow, small circles. No pulling. Just gentle rhythm. Cairo rotated Nia's legs gently, side to side, slow and steady. Callum stood nearby, ready to intervene if anything looked off. But everything stayed calm, controlled. You done this before? Callum asked, suspicion in his voice. Loads, Cairo replied, eyes still on the movement. Mum used to take me to community centers after school. She worked with ex-soldiers, people who couldn't pay for proper treatment. She always said everyone deserved dignity. I carried her bag. Callum raised a brow. And she taught you all this? She said you don't need expensive stuff. Just care and time. He tapped lightly on Nia's knee. Can you feel that? She shook her head. No. He nodded, unfazed. That's all right. I'll keep checking. He kept chatting as he worked, asked her favorite color, favorite pudding. What shows she liked best? At first, she barely answered. Then she asked him, Do you live nearby? Kind of. Do you go to school? Used to. Why'd you stop? He hesitated. Mum got sick. Then she passed. I've been trying to figure things out since. She looked down. I'm sorry. He gave her a small nod. Thanks. Callum's shoulders eased slightly. Still guarded, but something was softening. After about half an hour, Cairo gently tapped Nia's ankle. Anything? She blinked. Sort of. Like a light touch. Cairo glanced up. That's a good sign. Callum frowned. She says that sometimes in her hospital sessions, too. Yeah, Cairo said. But those are full of cold tools and wires. Kids get tense. But here. He motioned to the open park around them. This is different. Open space, fresh air. It lets the body relax. Callum didn't reply, but he was clearly listening now. Cairo helped Nia stretch both legs, then showed her small toe movements to try. Just to start reconnecting. She attempted it. Nothing visible. But she didn't look frustrated. I'll come again next week, Cairo said, standing. It takes patience. Your muscles, he pointed gently to her legs. They haven't forgotten. You just need to remind them. She smiled wider. Okay. Callum cleared his throat. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, he said. I'm not making promises, Cairo answered. Just giving it a shot. Callum studied him for a moment, then reached into his coat and held out a folded note. Cairo stepped back. No thank you, sir. I'm not here for that. Callum looked surprised. Then, why are you? Cairo gave a half shrug. Because she smiled. Callum looked down at Nia. She was still grinning quietly, and he didn't understand how this boy, who seemed to have so little, could give so much to a child he barely knew. The following Sunday came with gentler weather, but Cairo still wore his oversized jacket. He didn't need it. It reminded him of her. His mum used to call it his helper's coat. Said every healer needed something to remind them why they care. He arrived at the park early, laid out the towel, lined up his supplies. A bottle of water sat beside him. In the background, kids played basketball, and a dog barked beyond the hedge. At noon sharp, Callum's SUV pulled up. Nia was already grinning before the door opened. Hi, Nia, Cairo called, waving. Hi, she chirped, curls bouncing as Callum helped her out. Callum looked tired, but not heavy. He nodded at Cairo. No words, but it meant something. Same setup. Warm pack, slow stretches, but something had shifted. Can you press your heel into the ground? Cairo asked. Nia closed her eyes, focused. Nothing moved. That's okay, he said. Sometimes the brain just needs to find the path again. Like pushing through a crowd. You'll get there. Callum stood behind them, arms crossed. But this time, it looked more like keeping warm than keeping distant. Why do you do this? He asked suddenly. Cairo looked up. Because I remember how it felt. Watching Mum make people feel seen. I want to keep that going. Callum nodded slowly. Ever think about doing something else? Sometimes, Cairo said. But this feels right. Callum looked at Nia. Her toes twitched, just barely. But they moved. He didn't speak. He just watched. Cairo rolled the tennis balls beneath Nia's feet with gentle rhythm, coaxing her muscles to reawaken. He showed Callum how to apply pressure behind the knees, explaining each spot like it had a voice of its own, even if quiet. But then came the setback. Fourth Sunday. Cairo arrived early as usual. But when the SUV pulled in, something was off. Nia wasn't smiling. Her eyes were red. Callum looked worn thin. She's not doing this today, he said curtly, lifting her from the back seat. Nia kept her eyes away from both of them. Cairo stepped forward gently. What happened? She crossed her arms. I tried this morning. Nothing moved. I'm tired. It doesn't matter. Callum looked away, jaw clenched. She's been frustrated for days. Cairo knelt beside her again. You think I don't get tired too? She didn't reply. You think I never cried in a shelter when there wasn't money for medicine? And my mum just kept getting worse? Nia finally glanced at him. It's okay to be angry. I get angry too. But if you stop now, that part of you still fighting might stop with you. She stared at the ground. He leaned in. I don't want you to quit, he said gently. Because I haven't. Silence. Then she whispered. I'm scared. Callum turned sharply. That was the first time she'd admitted it out loud. Cairo nodded slowly. Me too. But fear doesn't mean give up. It usually means you're close. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her jumper. All right, let's try. And they did. Cairo went quiet. No talking this time, just calm. Focus. He guided her slowly through each stretch while Callum helped stabilize her, encouraging any little flicker of movement. 30 minutes passed. Then her right foot shifted. Not just a toe, a full slide. Stiff and awkward, but real. Callum dropped to one knee. Did that just do it again? She did. Cairo smiled faintly but didn't say a word. He just sat back, letting it happen. That night, Callum stood in his front garden on Crescent View Lane, staring up at the moon. He'd stopped trying to figure out who Cairo really was. It didn't matter anymore. Inside, Nia was laughing, retelling the moment to her aunt over the phone. The living room felt less like a sick ward, more like a home again. But something else had started to shift too. It wasn't just in Nia's legs, it was in him. The tension, the guilt, the wall he'd spent years building. Something was cracking. Monday afternoon, Callum sat in his office. An unsigned contract lay untouched in front of him. His phone buzzed with client calls, follow-ups, messages. None of it felt important anymore. What kept looping in his mind was that single moment. The park, the foot, the movement. He'd seen it. She had done it. And it all started because of a 9-year-old with patched-up boots and no last name he'd ever heard. He opened a browser, typed Cairo Ibarra Birmingham. Nothing. A few old newsletters. A mention of his mum, Amani Ibarra, volunteering at a local center. No photos, no address. The boy was nowhere. Except, he wasn't. By Saturday they were back at Harrington Park. This time, Callum brought an extra mat and a fold-up chair. When they arrived, he placed a sandwich beside Cairo's bag without a word. Cairo nodded in thanks. "Ready, Nia?" he asked. She grinned and gave a thumbs up. "Let's do it." Routine started. Warm pack, stretches, ankle rolls. But today, Callum sat with them, copying the moves. He fumbled a stretch. "You're going the wrong way," Cairo said, chuckling. "I haven't done this since uni," Callum muttered. They laughed. Nia, too. About 20 minutes in, Cairo reached into his bag. "Let's try something new." He unfolded a cloth belt and slipped it under Nia's knees. "Hold this end," he told Callum. "She's going to try to lift. Just a bit. We support, but she leads." "You sure?" Callum asked. "She's ready." Nia focused. Brow tight. A soft grunt, and both knees lifted. Barely an inch. But they lifted. Callum stared, stunned. "Did you just do that?" Nia's face lit up. "I think I did." His voice caught. "You really did it." Cairo nodded, eyes steady on the support strap. "The body knows what to do. It just takes someone willing to listen." Callum shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. "You're not like any kid I've ever met." Cairo didn't answer. He simply guided Nia into the next position. After the session, as they packed up their things, Callum crouched next to him. "Where do you go when this is over?" Cairo gave a small shrug. "Here and there." Callum lowered his voice. "Do you have somewhere to sleep?" Cairo paused. "Sometimes." Callum rubbed the back of his neck. "Ever think about staying with us for a bit?" Cairo's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "There's a guest room. You wouldn't be in anyone's way." Cairo looked down at his hands. "You sure your neighbors wouldn't mind a boy like me staying?" Callum chuckled. "After what you've done for my daughter, they'd better keep their mouths shut." Cairo didn't respond right away. But something shifted in his eyes. The next morning, Cairo stood at Callum's front step, rucksack slung over one shoulder, a blanket tucked under his arm. Callum opened the door in joggers and a hoodie, coffee in hand. "Right on time," he said with a grin. Nia ran into the hallway. "Cairo." He smiled. "Hey, superstar." Callum stepped aside. "Welcome home." The following days were quiet, but different. Cairo had his own room now, clean bedding, a proper desk. He didn't talk much, but he never missed a morning stretch with Nia. She was lifting both feet now, not walking yet, but the signal was there. Her brain was reaching out to her legs like it remembered the way. One evening, while Callum rinsed dishes, he paused and leaned on the sink. "Cairo?" he said over his shoulder. "Yeah? You ever think about going back to school?" Cairo looked up from his sketchpad. "Sometimes." "You should. You're smart. You could go far." Cairo tilted his head. "I want to help people walk again, like my mum did." Callum turned toward him. "Then let's find a way to make that happen." Cairo gave a quiet nod. "All right." They didn't need to say more. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of little sounds. Footsteps, laughter, pencils on paper. It felt alive. It started with a nurse walking her dog through Harrington Park. She noticed Naya, standing, smiling, lifting her knees. And next to her was that quiet boy from outside the hospital. She didn't interrupt, just watched. Then she went home and told her sister, who worked in patient services. A few days later, a hospital physio stopped Callum in the corridor. "Someone said Nia's making progress. That true?" Callum nodded. "Yeah. Thanks to someone we didn't see coming." Word spread quickly. The next Sunday, when they reached the park, 2 new families were already waiting. One boy used a walker. The other was a girl recovering from a stroke. Their parents had heard the stories. The boy. The movement. The change. Cairo glanced at Callum. Callum leaned in. "You don't have to." Cairo adjusted the strap on his backpack. "I want to." He gave up his regular session with Nia that day to work with the new kids. He showed their parents how to warm the rice packs, how to guide the stretches gently, how to encourage without pushing too far. And he talked to the kids like they were whole. "You're not broken," he told one girl. "You're just figuring out your way forward." Nia watched from the bench. She didn't interrupt, just smiled quietly. On the ride home, she said, "I like watching him help." Callum met her eyes in the mirror. "Yeah, me too. Makes it feel like we're part of something bigger." Families had started gathering early that morning, folding chairs in hand, quiet conversations floating across the park, a rhythm building that didn't need music. Callum parked near the swings as Nia stared out the window, unusually quiet. She wasn't anxious. She was ready. Cairo unpacked his bag as usual. Same careful towel layout, same tools lined up in the same order. But this time, his gaze paused on Naya a little longer. "You good?" She gave a small nod. No grin, no nerves, just a clear, steady calm. Callum wheeled her to the center of the mat. Cairo crouched down, hands on her knees. "We'll lift. You stay with it. That's all." Callum stepped behind her, arms placed under hers. Cairo steadied her legs. 1. Nia exhaled. 2. She closed her eyes. 3. Callum pulled gently. Cairo stabilized. Nia's body shook, knees buckling slightly. But she didn't fall. She stood. Straight-backed, feet planted. People stopped moving. A child dropped their juice cup. A mother froze, hand to her chest. Nia opened her eyes. "I'm up," she whispered. Cairo didn't move. "Yes, you are." Callum couldn't speak. His hands hovered at her sides, not holding her, just stunned. Then slowly, he stepped back. She stayed standing. One foot shifted forward, then the other. Nia took a step, then another, a third. She stumbled, collapsing into Callum's arms. He caught her like he'd been waiting forever. "You walked," he breathed. "You actually walked." Nia looked at Cairo. "You told me I could." "I said we'd try," he replied, eyes glassy. No one rushed to leave that day. Parents lingered. Strangers introduced themselves like old friends. Kids sat on the grass, smiling without needing to speak. Cairo returned to the bench and just watched. His hands rested on his knees. He didn't say much. He never did. Later that evening, the house was quiet. Not the old kind of quiet, full of walls and grief, but the new kind. Soft sounds. Footsteps. the kettle clicking off. Cairo stood at the kitchen counter, pouring milk into cereal. Callum leaned against the doorway. You know what today was, right? Cairo didn't turn. A good one. Callum stepped closer. My daughter walked. Not because of a surgeon, or some big breakthrough, but because a kid with no training kept showing up. Cairo stirred his spoon. That's what my mum used to say. Just keep showing up. Callum's voice cracked. She would have been proud. She saw it, Cairo said. I feel it. Callum placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You're going to do big things. Cairo finally looked up. I already am. A week later, they arrived at the park to find even more families waiting. New kids, new carers. One mum brought banana bread. Someone set up a folding table. They didn't post signs, they didn't advertise, but the space was full. And at the center, Cairo, with his towel and bag, nodding quietly, already kneeling in front of a new boy's wheelchair. Nia sat beside her dad, no longer the only one. Do you think people know it's him? She asked softly. Callum smiled. They don't need a name. They just know who he is. Across the field, a local journalist raised a camera, then paused. Callum walked over. Before you ask, he's not doing this for a headline. The reporter nodded. We're not here for that. We're here because kids are moving again. If this story meant something to you, pass it on. And if you know someone like Cairo, or a kid like Nia, remind them, you don't need everything to give something. You matter. You're enough.